Good morning. Welcome to another Morning Java brought to you by our friends at the Get-Go Cafe and Market, where they are still open. You can get curbside pickup to go. You just order on the Giant Eagle app, and you can pull up, you call them, they bring it out to you. You can get, my favorite are the milkshakes. They have like a banana cream pie flavor. Mike, I don't know if you've been there, but you gotta go try the milkshakes.
I
Birthday
love
cake.
milkshakes, yeah.
Yeah, they're unreal. But so big day Monday, the Penguins opened training camp. All 24 participating teams opened training camp in the NHL. I think it was like 5 minutes before the Penguins took the ice, we got some big news that 9 players were going to be held out of practice because secondary exposure to coronavirus, someone who tested positive for coronavirus. So
I think they called it potential secondary
well,
exposure, right? Yeah.
someone did did have coronavirus on the outside. Someone came into contact with that person, and then that person came into contact with 9 penguins. But it's interesting. I mean, you look at how the league is handling this now. Teams are now not allowed to say anything about positive test who has coronavirus. You're seeing guys sitting out all around the league. A bunch of teams have guys sit out, and they're just calling it unfit to play. And because teams don't want you to be able to the league doesn't want people to be able to guess if someone tested positive. Teams aren't allowed to release injury information either. So like they'll say unfit to play. That could be injury. That could be corona. You don't know, but I'm not crazy about the idea because everyone is just assuming corona if a guy is out. So, but yeah, I don't know what you think about that and how teams are disseminating that information.
Well, one of the things I'm curious about, I mean, you've followed hockey for a very long time, and they've always sort of been secretive with, it's an upper body injury or it's a lower body injury, and now it's unfit to play.
Yeah.
Besides hockey and the Patriots, it seems like those have been the entities that have been real secretive about this had a chance with the coronavirus for teams to maybe be a little more transparent and a little more open. I'm kind of curious from your perspective, here was a chance for hockey to kind of open up just a little bit and a little bit of insight into what's going on in terms of injuries or in terms of illness. And clearly you're not going to get that. And I don't know if bummer's the right word, but, what are your thoughts on, losing that possible transparency?
Yeah, I know when, it came out, the season's probably going to restart. A lot of people were thinking how are they going to tell us what's happening? And a lot of people were saying, oh, it's going to be a week-to-week upper body injury because, respiratory.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm not crazy about it because I feel like if the NHL is able to keep that information secret and not tell you exactly who is dealing with it, if things start to go bad, it kind of lets them cover it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If we start seeing positive tests, once we get in the bubble, if a player goes missing, it could be corona. There could be corona in the bubble. We're just not going to know. It could be an injury. It could be whatever. We're not going to know. I don't know. I guess but like you said, the NHL, that's kind of how they handle things.
Yeah. Well, me following college sports, it's kind of interesting because with the colleges, you're never going to find out what individuals have it, I think, unless some individual goes on Twitter or Instagram, whatever their preferred social media platform may be, and says, I've got it. They would probably be in trouble with their school if they did that. But you're not going to know the individuals. But some colleges are releasing information. We know Clemson. We know, Texas. We know certain schools have said, hey, we've had this many cases. This has happened. Pitt isn't in that line of schools that are releasing that information. They, because of the university, are just saying, here's who's on campus who's tested positive for the coronavirus. And that person has been on campus at some point in the last 14 days. So that's about as vague as you can possibly be. You don't know who, you don't know what. Now, you sort of wonder well, who's on campus at this point?
Mm-hmm.
It's probably student athletes, but you can't really draw an exact line to the number to student athletes. So it's odd. There's some odd parallels there in terms of not finding out and transparency.
Yeah, because the Penguins did have someone test positive during the informal skates. And it, like, you know, they're not gonna. We know it was a Penguin, but we didn't know who. But kind of what, how you're saying, people are. So like the Penguins said it was someone who was in Pittsburgh, and at the time there weren't that many people in Pittsburgh. So, or no, they said it was someone not in Pittsburgh. So like people are playing like Guess Who, you know, the game. You're like, okay, I'm gonna flip down all the guys who are in Pittsburgh because it's not them. Flip down all the guys we've seen like on the ice in other towns. So I don't know. I just think if you're being secretive, it allows for more like speculation like that.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I do understand needing to keep it secret because like there's a report that 3 Canadians players tested positive since then. A second report came out that 2 of them were false positives, so only 1. But at the time it came out, and fans were like, like someone replied to me about it, like, I thought hockey players would be smarter about this. And it's like, you don't know what they were doing. That doesn't mean they're out of bars. You know, it could have been, you know, like something like at the rink. You don't know, but
Could have got it from grandma. You never know.
it's interesting. But yeah, I guess it'll be interesting to see how they deal with this moving forward. Mike, another interesting thing is as teams are starting to come back, is a lot of athletes are opting out. We're seeing it, MLB players are opting out, NBA, a lot of players in the WNBA opting out. And I know a lot of people going into, the NHL coming back thought that NHL players would be different because hockey culture really discourages, any guy acting like an individual. But we have seen a bunch of, maybe not a bunch, but a good amount of guys opting out. So no one on the Penguins. Zach Trotman's out, but it's injury. The Canadians had a fringe defenseman. He would have been a depth guy, opt out. Pretty interesting. And their number 3 leading scorer has diabetes, and he may not report to camp. He has another week to decide. And I think that's really interesting to see around the league. I don't know, but I think I like to see that, guys, because all the guys that have opted out, most of them, they have like family issues, like someone has like a daughter with like a respiratory virus, or people with conditions. So I like guys feeling comfortable enough to opt out. But like, I don't know if you've seen like fan reactions to guys doing that. But like, I don't know, I think I tweeted about, one of the Canadians, Carl Alsner, opting out, and the replies are like calling him like a coward. And like, people are like, a lot of them are being like questioned, like, you're going into a bubble, like how stupid is it to opt out? I just want to know what you think about guys opting out, and, I guess how they're being treated in response to doing that.
I guess, for starters, I guess it's hardly surprising that that's how they're being treated. I'm a Lakers fan and have been since I was a kid, and their starting point guard Avery Bradley is one of the players who opted out. And here's a team that is, maybe favored to win in the NBA bubble that's down in Orlando, which is just an entirely odd and goofy situation that you have possibly the biggest hotspot of coronavirus cases in the world possibly is in Florida right now, and you've got NBA players in a bubble in Disney World, trying to compete, get ready to compete in a playoff atmosphere. But you mentioned, if you have people with family, kids with issues, I mean, how do you, my personal standpoint, how would you justify playing in those circumstances? Now, if you're quarantined and you're away from them, I guess that's one thing, and you have no contact with them. But maybe we can't. I'm thinking personally, like trying to be away from my family for something like that, and I would not want to do something like that. I would want to be near my family. I'd want to be around them all the time. And a lot of those guys, they might be professional athletes, but I think that they think the same way. It's their family, that's their life. They play basketball or hockey or whatever it is as a job, but they've got stuff to go home to, and that's got to be the priority in my mind. As a husband, as a father, as somebody whose parents are older, you want to take care of the people that matter the most to you. And I guess that's the choice you have to make. Maybe the choice is playing, maybe the choice is opting out. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I just think a lot of these players have like young kids and pregnant wives, girlfriends. I know, the hockey players have spoken before that like they do, if they're going to have a kid, they do try to time it so like the kid is going to be born in the off season. But I mean, that's now July. It's prime time to be having kids if you're a hockey player. And now a lot of them are going to have to go into the bubble. I know like Carey Price, goaltender for the Canadiens. He has a wife, 2 young daughters, and then his wife is pregnant. And they're back, I think, either in British Columbia or Washington State, around that area. And he's going to be in Toronto for you don't even know how long. And we talk about, players that have family members with issues. And I know a lot of people don't like that reason because they're like, oh, you're going in a bubble, you're going to be fine. But
Yeah.
I mean, we're seeing like the bubbles are not perfect. The NHL, I mean, they pretty much said as much that, it can't be perfect when they had the press conference Saturday. What the MLS had a player test positive in a bubble. Like, it's not perfect. And then you figure even when the season's over, leaving the bubble, they're going to have to like fly home. And, a lot of these guys do not have private jets. Like, they're going to have to fly home commercially and, opening up to all potential sources of contact. And then they have to go home to their families. And then what, do they hang out in a hotel in their hometown for like 2 weeks? And for teams like, the Canadiens, who like, they probably don't have that great of a chance at winning the cup. And especially if you're like a fringe guy like Carl Eisner, I can't blame anyone who opts out in that situation.
I'm with you on that.
All right, yeah, the biggest probably news in sports on Monday was that Washington's NFL team, after 87 years, dropping their name, which, I mean, many consider to be a racial slur, finally, after 87 years. It took some, I guess you'd say, strong arming by sponsors. I know, like, the D.C. mayor said they couldn't come back onto the old RFK Stadium site until, they dropped the name. But yeah, I don't know about you, but are you surprised that it finally happened? I mean, I think I figured after 87 years, like, they were just going to go with it,
It seemed like it, right? You've got to wonder what took so long. I mean, just years and years of people, asking for this change. And finally it happens. It's about time, really. I mean, my Lord. And, I'm kind of curious, what are some of the names you might like to see? Because you've got some ties to the area.
Yeah. So I'm from Baltimore. I know people, fans of the team. My mom is. I've seen 3, prevailing suggestions. I've seen Warriors. And I think the people that want Warriors, they want to keep the same. So the team is changing the logo, but I think the people who want Warriors want to keep the same like Native American kind of motif. Is that the word? Okay. Red Tails is another one, which would be named after Tuskegee Airmen, which is like there was a black, what is that? Was it World War II?
Yeah. They were, I think they were airplane pilots.
So like it would be like, I've seen like the mock-up, fans creating logos for the Red Tails, and it is like plain imagery. And then I've seen Red Wolves, but and I think whatever they do, I think would be nice to keep the same color scheme, burgundy and gold, to at least keep some semblance of the sameness for the fans. And I think all 3 of those would allow them to do that. And so I'm not crazy about Warriors, because one of the issues with the old name was that it kind of encouraged fans to come to the stadium dressed in like headdresses, war paint, which is like not okay. I know like a lot of people say, the name was like honoring Native people, but when you have like drunk white guys showing up with like war paint and a headdress that they don't understand the significance of. That's not
At an
honoring.
NFL game, right?
Yeah, that's not honoring anything. Like that's just like appropriate. It's playing Indian is what I've seen a lot of people call it. So I'm not crazy about Warriors, and I think you'd think they'd know better to stick with like some kind of like native imagery, because everything that's happening, you're seeing like, you know, people want like the Braves, they're talking about that too. So I think, but Red Tails, Red Wolves, I like both of those. I think both either would be a really good option.
When I think of Warriors, I automatically, maybe it's because they've been good for the last 5 to 8 years, my mind automatically goes to Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors.
That's
you know, it's
thing,
like instant. So it'd be hard to kind of associate a new team with that name. And I kind of agree with you. I kind of like the Red Tails myself. And like you said, keeping the color scheme would be kind of key, especially from a merchandising standpoint. And you know, changing all that up would cost them quite a bit of money. The colors, at least, you know, if there's something that they can change, the name's the most important thing. But you know, depending on fans in the stands, you're looking at a whole lot of financial impact. If you change the color scheme too, I think, is then you got to come out with a whole new line of wear and stuff, you know?
Yeah, well, and then you figure the Red Tails and the Red Wolves would allow them to keep their, because like HTTR, hail to the, you know, that's the whole thing. So
that's
that,
right.
you know, an R word as like that it would be able to keep that. I know they have like a fight song. You could at least rework that with the new name. I mean, they've reworked the fight song before. I don't know. I was reading into it, like their original fight song, well, not the original one, but for I guess a couple early in the team's history, it included references to like scalping, which like, if knowing that, you can't argue that like, oh, it's done out of respect for Native people.
Yeah.
And I know people who support, you know, didn't want them to change the name, they always go to there's like all kinds of studies done with like Native people, like what do you think? And you know, some studies will say like, oh, you know, the majority of Native people are it's interesting. So the studies, typically the ones looking to find reason to keep the name, they're not looking for support, they're looking for apathy. So like, it's like, are you offended by the name, or are you not offended by the name? But like, not if that's not in support, you know. It's like apathy. And I think apathy isn't an opinion, but like I think it was Berkeley that did a study where they actually focused on Native people who are like active in the community and people who strongly identify with, you know, their Native culture. And in those instances, it was like something like 67% of them wanted to change the name. And I know recently, the week before they changed the name, it was like 12 Native American leaders who, I mean, represent thousands of people, did write, you know, a letter like saying like, hey, it's time to change the name.
And I feel like that's been going on for years, maybe not that specific, but like instances like that.
Back in, I think when they dropped scalping from the fight song, I think it was in the 70s, it was like during, you know, a big wave of trying to get them to change the name. And it's I think a big part of it is because their stadium right now, it's in Landover, Maryland. It's not near anything. They want to get back into DC, the old RFK Stadium site. And like I said earlier, the mayor said they can't come back into DC until they change the name. And I think it's really interesting coming full circle, because if you look at like in the 60s, the team, the original owner, George Marshall, because, you know, they were the last team to integrate. And it was because of the owner. And the owner, so when they were playing at it wasn't RFK yet, but that stadium, they were being threatened with like, oh, we're going to kick you out of, you know, the stadium unless you integrate. So I just think it's interesting that racism, you know, almost got them kicked out of the RFK site initially. And now, like, the team keeping up like the racist, you know, name, whatever, almost kept them out of coming back onto the RFK site. It's just interesting to see things come full circle, and I think it's good that they made the right decision.
Yeah, it's great. It's about time. That's all I can say about that. About time.
About time.